Welcome everyone. Hi, I'm Ty. I'm so happy to have you guys here join the session. Today we're gonna have Larry that is already here with us. So let's give just a few minutes so people can join the session here. I can see a few people already join, a few familiar faces, a few new ones. Before we get started this, I wanna give you I wanna give you a few housekeeping rules. So Larry is gonna present everything here for us, and if anyone has questions or want to ask more about something, please drop at the Q&A session here. Go there in your Zoom, drop any questions that you have. I'm gonna help Larry to answer anything that is open here. And by the end of the session, I'm gonna show to Larry all the questions and we're gonna talk about it. So for today, as you guys have been seeing, I have the absolute pleasure to introduce you our speaker for today, Larry Bridgesmith. Larry is halfway in legal innovation space. He's award-winning tech founder and blockchain pioneer and the CEO of the Legal Alignment. He's also a dedicated educator who teaches at the Vanderbilt, Belmore, and Arizona State. Larry's here today to share his incredible insights with us. So thank you so much, Larry. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Todd.
Oh, Larry, I think you are muted.
How about now? Did we get
Oh,
it?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Now you
Yeah.
are.
Okay, good. So the value of what I think we can do today is really the result of a lot of hard learning that I experienced over time. I came out of law school thinking that, well, if I've got the best argument, then they're going to believe me and they're going to change their mind. Well, I discovered pretty in a difficult way the ability of people to change their mind only under very, very limited circumstances. I became a mediator and a negotiation teacher because I understood that we simply can't force people to change the way they think. We can help them, we can influence them, but compulsion, coercion doesn't last. If it lasts at all, it's only till we're out of their vicinity that it lasts. It doesn't change the brain. So I want to talk a little bit about what I've learned over that period of time, which is a part of a book that I'm about to publish about learning how to lead, because I think helping people change their brain is helping them to improve everything that they do. So how do we rewire and understand it? First of all, we have to understand that we're not who we think we are. We have this notion of our brilliance as lawyers, as legal professionals, and it's true, absolutely true. But what has been discovered, and Larry Richard is a psychologist and former lawyer who has been studying the characteristics and the personality of lawyers for almost 30 years. He says that basically we have a percentile of population representation that would really startle us. And what he said is that we are in the 90th percentile in skepticism. And I mean, if anybody's been to law school, if anybody has been around lawyers, you know, anything you say, I can challenge it. And when I deal with people trying to help them understand, and if they're lawyers, it's not easy to change because we've already decided what the right answer is, and we're not about to be changed in terms of our perspective and our thinking. Well, that's true unless we understand how the brain works. So, the brain is not fixed, meaning that it's not a single set of decision-making tools that are not flexible. It was discovered many years ago that the brain is what is called neuroplastic, meaning that changes in the brain occur under certain specific circumstances. The adult brain isn't static. It's constantly forming new neural pathways. And every time a new neural pathway is created, it's created not simply because we've decided to create it. It's created because we've experienced something new. So think about the whole recovery community. People with any kind of addiction, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, and they've gone to a support group, a recovery group. They have to begin by understanding that their brain can be changed and they're not in control of it. And they have to understand that how they change that brain is not replace their old neural pathways. That's impossible. But you create new neural pathways by behavior, by conscious effort. And over time, those new neural pathways get stronger and stronger and stronger, but they're only relied upon by choice. You can talk to an alcoholic who has been in recovery for 30 years, and they'll tell you all it takes is a single drink, and my neural pathways take over. So all we can do is replace those with new experiences. And so that's what led me to understand that when we're talking about change, we have to understand that there are two different systems in our brain. A lot of neuroscientists have proven this. Daniel Kahneman is probably the foremost leading neuroscientist that established in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, that there are two systems. The first system is that system that responds when we have a threat to something important to us. And it is automatic. It reacts. It's not cognitive. It doesn't think. It simply relies upon past behaviors. When a bear shows up and raises its paws, you don't ask yourself, well, I wonder what species of bear that is. I wonder how he got here. No, we just run. And as a result, that's not thought in a deliberative sense. That's thought from the perspective of our experience, which generates our reactions. But system two is a very different system. And that's where deliberative reasoning takes place, meaning that's where we believe the rationality occurs, that we are separated from the rest of the live animals in the world. And that is what separates us, because the system one, they call the reptilian brain, because snakes, frogs, lizards, that's the lizard brain. But as humans, we have this other system that is superior, but not nearly as fast. System one will operate at the rate of about 11 million bits per second if it were a computer. System two, if it were a computer, operates at the rate of about 40 bits per second. Remarkable difference, change in speed. And so when threat occurs, our reasoning capacity goes offline. But there are a number of risks that we can identify that stop our brain and react, even if it's not a physical threat. Because one of the things that the brain does well, extraordinarily well, is it defends our identity before it even looks at the evidence. It's like the rider of an elephant. The elephant's going to go where the elephant goes. And the rider really isn't changing the elephant's direction. The rider is simply doing what the element does. And that's how our identities are protected. And these are the threats that can, just like that, stop the change of our brain's functioning in an instant. If our status is threatened, if fairness is threatened, if certainty is threatened, autonomy, our ability to make our own decisions, and relationships. That's the SCARF model: status, certainty, fairness, autonomy, relatedness. SCARF. And we've seen this. I don't know how many of you have been in mediation, either as a participant or as a mediator. I've mediated for over 20 years, which I've seen in every mediation that's a successful conclusion. There's this moment in time that you can just feel the room shift. And what has happened is the people who had started out in this dispute in a certain mindset that they have been wronged and that they understand the facts in ways that the other party can't understand. And they're there to protect their scarf. All of the risks to our identity, to our security, to our reputation are putting us in a reactive mindset. But if a mediation goes well, it's because the mediator has been able to help the parties take another look at their state, another look at their outcome and the consequences of maintaining their position. And I've watched incredibly impossible resolutions to disputes that would never have been predicted. And as a matter of fact, before people sit down at the table, predicted that this won't be solved. And what has happened is they've opened their mind to new evidence, to new facts, and to new possibilities. That's when the mind can change. And these are the things that actually work. These are the 6 things that we can do to improve the ability of anyone, and lawyers especially, since we're so wired not to agree with someone else. If we use these tools, we can help people change their brain in our leadership of other lawyers and our work with other lawyers. First, we have to understand ourselves that the brain can change. We have to accept the fact that I don't have to retain all of my learned behaviors, all of my habits, if I choose not to. That's the beginning point. And again, I go back to recovery. It's not until we recognize that we are not in control of our habits that we can begin to control them with a different approach. That's where it begins. But then it takes us to a place that we have to provide psychological safety, meaning those risks of scarf aren't activated, that we allow others to think autonomously for themselves, and we use experience to show that the alternatives are real and valuable. Our experiences teach far more than our arguments. And then we can begin to deal with the social environment. How are others affected by this problem and our need to think differently? What would be the outcome if we thought differently? And then that habit architecture, meaning the way in which we continue to do things in a different way, begins to create those new neural pathways. And then if we're aware of how we can positively impact those scarf concerns, then people will begin to change the way they think. But you can't demand it. You can't simply tell people that they must do it with any success in changing their thinking about doing it. Yeah, we may have power over them. We may compel them with a threat to terminate them or anything, deprive them of any benefit, damage their reputation. Those are the scarf factors that we simply can't demand that people ignore. So we have to create a safe place in which we can expect and accept differences of opinion, ask the kinds of questions that open up their mind, and we'll get to that in a moment because it's the most important skill we can use, and then explore with them what a new environment might look like. So demanding doesn't work, but better questions does. So we can't make better arguments and win, but we can ask better questions. And here are 4 examples of what I consider the kinds of questions that we can ask that will help people, first of all, understand they're in a safe place, that their opinion is valuable, that they have a right to change their own mind, and then begin to think about deliberatively, not reactively, the way in which it can better achieve our desires. So, for example, let's say that we're talking about a new business mechanism. Let's say that we're going to change the way our lawyers work their cases. We're going to introduce them to workflow processing, and we're going to tell them that's what we're going to do from now on. Well, I'm a lawyer. I don't like to be told what to do. I imagine most of you don't either. So we can ask a question like this, which is different. For example, well, what about the current approach is serving you best? Okay, now we're identifying the positives. We're more than willing to talk about those things. And another question would be, well, if you could design a change, what would you protect in those things that need to be beneficial? You're giving them the opportunity to identify and think through a solution to a problem. And then you might ask, well, what would need to be true for this new approach to feel worth trying? What would it take for you to say, okay, let's give this a try? Now they're answering the questions. They're providing a pathway. They're giving us the insights that make this a possibility. And then what would you want to be able to say about how that went? Looking back, what would you want to be able to say about the journey that was taken? Because now you're putting them in the future mode and not the past mode. So when they can articulate what they would like to be able to say, they're opening their mind to think about new output, new information, and new behaviors. And this is not a trait, it's a characteristic. It's a moment in time that we have the responsibility, if we're going to lead others, to be able to make it better. And I consider the most important decision that we make if we're trying to influence others when we are being attacked, not physically, but just by reputation or otherwise, is to do what I call pause. Because when we realize that our reactive mode of thinking is now being activated, if I can pause before I react just long enough to recognize that fact that my lizard brain is about to take over, then I can stop and be deliberative. So it's that moment that matters most. And here are three tools for law firm leaders that I believe will be very helpful. Is first, to understand that SCARF diagnostic. Before you implement change or seek to do so, look at those SCARF factors: security, certainty, autonomy, fairness. Those are the things that people are automatically reactive to if threatened. Think through in this particular encounter what those might be for the other person. And tool number two is begin the conversation with inquiry, not expectations demanded of someone else. Ask those questions that we talked about. I call them open-ended questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no. Questions that help people think through what they maybe have never thought through before. And then finally, tool number three is let's examine how when we bring this kind of thinking, we don't have to deal with scarcity, in which one party is being threatened to lose and the other party is willing to win at the other's expense. This is not living in a scarcity mindset. This is living in a abundant mindset, because it's been proven over and over and over again. When we can collaborate and find a common mutually beneficial outcome, we don't shrink the pie. We don't slice the pie. We grow the pie. And that's the growth mindset that this kind of thinking can do. So, reminding us that the brain is not fixed and you're not fixed. We can continue to grow our minds when we put our mind in the place that it helps us embrace the new ideas. And then finally, it's not whether. Can you design and initiate change? Yeah. If you do it in a way that helps other people learn how not to react, they feel safe, they're not threatened, and then we can explore the changes that bring us to a better place. So that's my sermon. I'm happy to address any questions and really appreciate the opportunity, Ty. Thank you for inviting me in.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry. And while people are dropping questions here, I have a question for you. That
Sure.
is, what I saw a lot, it's firms that maybe it's not even the partner, the owner that is looking for a change. It's more like the staff member
Mhm.
because of a request of the attorney. So it's kind of, I need this
Mhm.
done, but to have this done, you first need to change your mindset. So
Mhm.
do you think this is a pattern that happen inside law firms while the staff members, paralegal, they are aware that something have to change, but they are having difficult to
Mhm.
back to the lawyer, the managing attorney, and show them we need to change the way that we are doing so far.
Well, I think it applies, and I want to go back to the mindset of most attorneys. I am one of them,
Yeah.
and nobody tells me what to do. I resist, I resent, and I will refuse to change when somebody tells me that I must. So even when I am reporting to someone who has that mindset, I don't do anything differently than I just said. We don't go to an attorney who has supervisory authority over us and say things must change. Instead, we have to understand, first of all, that the mind is not fixed, and that if I approach this in the right way, recognize what the scarf factors are in this particular conversation on behalf of the other person. Am I challenging their security, their certainty, their autonomy? What might be at risk here? Be aware of that. And then before you have any conversation, start asking great questions.
Yeah.
Things like, how is this current system working for you? Do you see really good outputs? Are there any things that we should be addressing in terms of how do we improve it? That can begin a conversation that may not go to the end that you seek, but it can open the mind and perhaps create a willingness to explore other options. And honestly, there's no other way to get people to think differently than they've already decided to think.
No, that's really great. And another point that I want to bring to us here is most of the time, even though when the managing attorney or the lawyers of the firm know they have to change, know they need to implement something new, but they don't have either the ability to convince the rest of the team or time consuming. How do you approach that? This is the consultants that we are talking about. This is something in group. How is the process in practice?
It's exactly the same. I'm afraid it doesn't change. If you have the opportunity to help someone think differently, realize that their position is not who they are. Their position is what they've come to understand is true, and therefore they're not willing to examine it. So the only way people will examine what they've already determined to be true is to ask them questions that make them question whether it's true or not. So give me a specific example of what kind of change that someone would like to achieve on behalf of another person. Just give me a specific example of that consultant's problem.
Yeah, I mean about when a firm attorney wants to implement something new in the office,
Hmm.
but they have to go through this process inside their staff.
Hmm.
And they're, I will not say they are too busy, but maybe they're not the best, it's their best skill to make on
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
So I feel it's like a kind of too busy to really address those topics. How do you think those law firms could address that?
Well, again, if somebody doesn't want to change their thinking, they won't.
Yeah,
Pure and simple, right?
yeah,
So they have to be invited into a conversation that helps them examine from their own perspective, from their own experience, what the nature of change would be if they could make it. In other words, whatever the system is or whatever the practice is that needs to be changed, you begin by asking, how's it working for you?
Yeah.
Oh, it's working perfectly. Oh, really? Because nothing is perfect. So what would be better? What would we need to change to make this a better process? That gives them the authority then and the autonomy to think through how to improve this process and can open the door if we continue to ask the right kinds of questions magically for them to come up with the decision and make it their own. That's what a mediator does in a mediation room. Continues to ask questions until one of the parties says, "Oh, I've got an idea." And
Mm,
that's when the room changes. It doesn't happen until those questions have been received, trusted in a safe and secure way, and then they can begin to think about the alternatives.
yeah. That's really amazing. Thank you so much, Larry. Thanks so much for your time and to share with us. I'm really excited about your book that you are close to launch. So please share with us when it's done so we can share with everyone here.
I will
Uh,
do that. Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you everyone to join us. We're gonna send this recorded session and also all the materials Larry produced to us to everyone. And we see everyone next month, probably. Okay.
Thank you all. Have a great
Thank
month.
you. You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye.